So if you want to become a British citizen, you've got to pass this test that's based on an official guide. But here's the thing, it's not just a boring list of facts and dates. Nope, it tells a story. The official story of how modern Britain and its values came to be. So let's peel back the curtain and see what that story really is.
This right here, this is the actual pledge every new citizen takes. It's a serious promise to the whole country. It's the very last thing you do. And honestly, it brings up a really big question.
I mean, what are these democratic values? Where did these rights and freedoms even come from? They didn't just appear out of thin air. They were fought for, argued over, and won across centuries. And to really get it, we need to go back, way back.
Okay, so our first stop is the long, often messy, and yes, sometimes violent struggle to build a democracy. This is really the story of how power moved from the hands of just one person, the monarch, into the hands of many.
But first, a super quick bit of context. The United Kingdom isn't just one country, right? It's a union of four: England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And how these nations all came together is a huge part of this story.
And this is the central theme, the thing to remember. The rights and freedoms that British citizens have today were not gifts from a king or queen. They were won. You can pretty much see British history as one long, slow-motion tug-of-war for power.
The first major pole on that tug-of-war, it happened all the way back in 1215. It was called the Magna Carta, the Great Charter. And this was a revolutionary idea. For the very first time, it put down in writing that even the king had to follow the law. Now, let's be real. It was mostly about protecting the powerful nobles, not the average person. But it planted this crucial seed, the idea that no one is above the law. By the 1600s, that little seed had exploded into open warfare. On one side, you had King Charles I, who was a big believer in the divine right of kings, the idea that God put him in charge, so his power was absolute. On the other side was Parliament, saying, hold on, we represent the people, and we should control the country's money and its army. Charles tried to rule without them, and it led to a brutal civil war that ended with something totally unthinkable: the public execution of the king.
And getting from A to B was an incredibly long and slow process. Just think about it. From that first step, the Magna Carta, it took almost 500 years to get to the Bill of Rights, which finally cemented Parliament's power. But even then, only a tiny handful of people could actually vote. It wasn't until 1928, more than 700 years after Magna Carta, that all men and women over 21 finally got that right.
So while all this was happening inside Britain, the country was also looking outward. Its story went global. The rise and fall of the British Empire would completely reshape the nation's economy, its people, and that idea of tolerance that's in the Citizenship Pledge. Now, the engine that powered all of this global expansion was the Industrial Revolution. Britain literally became the workshop of the world. Its factories were just pouring out goods, creating immense wealth, and fueling the growth of the largest empire in history.
But, and this is a huge but, this prosperity had a brutal dark side. The official guide itself makes it crystal clear. This economic boom was partly built on the slave trade. While slavery was illegal inside Britain, the empire ran a massive and horrific slave industry overseas that generated enormous wealth.
So this created a really complex legacy. I mean, at its height, the empire ruled over 400 million people. But at the exact same time, a powerful movement of abolitionists was growing within Britain, and they successfully fought to get the slave trade banned in 1807 and then slavery itself abolished in 1833. Fast forward to after World War II, and those old imperial ties led to a whole new chapter when people from the former empire were invited to help rebuild the country. And that's what created the diverse, multicultural Britain we see today.
And that brings us to the 20th century. After two absolutely devastating world wars, Britain's focus shifted away from its global empire and turned inward, to the challenges at home. The country had to create a new social contract with its own people, and that led to the birth of the modern welfare state.
Just try to picture it. Britain had won the war, but the country was shattered. It was broke, cities were in ruins, and the people had sacrificed so much, they were done with the old ways. They demanded a new kind of society, a new promise from their government. The blueprint for that new promise came from a famous report in 1942. It laid out a stark diagnosis of the nation's problems, identifying 5 giant evils that had to be defeated. They were want, meaning poverty, disease, ignorance, a lack of education, squalor, terrible housing, and idleness, mass unemployment.
And the response was nothing short of radical. The post-war government took these huge, monumental steps to create a safety net for every single citizen, a promise of protection from the cradle to the grave. They created the National Health Service, the NHS, guaranteeing free health care. They built a national benefit system. They even took key industries like the railways and coal mines into public ownership. This was the birth of the modern welfare state.
So, after that whirlwind tour through civil war, the rise and fall of an empire and radical social reform, what does it all mean today? Well, let's connect all those dots and bring it back to where we started, that citizenship pledge.
Here they are, the fundamental principles. And now you can see exactly where they come from. Democracy and the rule of law, forged in that long, hard battle between Parliament and the Crown. Tolerance, that comes directly out of the complex legacy of a global empire. And participation in community life, that's a direct echo of that post-war dream of a welfare state, where everyone contributes and everyone is looked after.
See, these aren't just abstract words on a page. They are ideas that were hammered out in the heat of history. They represent the official story Britain tells about itself, a narrative of a long and often very difficult journey.
And for anyone who wants to become a citizen, understanding that story is non-negotiable. The official test they have to pass has 24 questions, all based on the history and the principles we've just walked through. Which leaves us with a final thought. This story isn't over. The values we've talked about were forged to deal with the challenges of the past. So, the big question for the future is, in a world with totally new conflicts, new technologies, and new debates, will these principles endure? Or will they need to be forged all over again?